Good afternoon. I am Vaughn Albury. Thank you for joining the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training's Examination and Assessment Division's press conference on the results of the 2022 national examinations, namely the BJC and the BGCSE held earlier this year. To our Honorable Minister of Education and Technical and Vocational Training, the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin, our State Minister, the Honorable Zane Lightburn, Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Lorraine Simonette Armbrister, Undersecretary, Sonia Culmer, Director of Education, Marcellus Taylor, and other top officials from the Ministry of Education, educators, members of the press, and others, a pleasant good afternoon. I would be remiss if I were not to announce also to my left, Mrs. Evelyn Sawyer. She is the Assistant Director of Education in charge of Examination and Assessments Division. Again, good afternoon. This past spring, earlier this year, the Examination and Assessment Division of our ministry had a successful sitting of the 2022 BJC and BGCSE examinations, despite the threat of COVID-19 to disrupt the scheduled calendar of exams. It was the first time since 2019 that there was no suspension or disruption in national examinations. Ladies and gentlemen, 2022 also marks the 30th anniversary of the sitting of the BGCSE examination, which replaced the London-based General Certificate of Education, GCE O-Levels, in 1993. It should be noted that only 15% of high school seniors sat GCE exams, and in fact, one had to be recommended by teachers to do so. On the other hand, the BGCSE exams, which is graded from A to U, is geared for 80% of eligible students to sit. Our BGCSE exam is endorsed by the University of Cambridge Local Examination Syndicate, and the development, marking, and awarding of grades are closely monitored by Cambridge International Examinations. Of note, the BJC exam for junior high school students was reintroduced in 1994, so the year 2022 marks its 29th sitting. At this time, I would like to invite our Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Lorraine Simonette Armbrister, to bring the welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albury, and we welcome those joining us live by Facebook and all persons here present. Minister Glenys Hannah Martin, Minister of State, Mr. Zane Lightburn, Director of Education, Mr. Marcellus Taylor, Executive Managers including Undersecretary Sonia Colmer, Deputy Directors Julian Anderson and Sharon Poitier, and Acting Deputy Director Ms. Charmaine Sinclair, Acting DPS Ms. Keishan Bastian, Consultant Ms. Saritha Clark, ADE Evelyn Sawyer, and Technical Officers from the Examination and Assessment Division, representatives from the media, good afternoon. There are two valuable components in the process of education, namely instruction and assessment. Research has proven that these two components support each other. Yearly, as a part of our assessment strategies, 3 national examinations are developed. Much hard work goes into the development and administration of national examinations, as well as in the preparation of students who sit those examinations. The Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training is most appreciative of the roles played by Assistant Director of Education Sawyer and the staff of Examination and Assessment Division, the examiners, the school administrators, teachers, and parents in this most important aspect of the educational spectrum. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's event, which is being held to report on the overall performance of candidates in the 2022 BJC and BGCSE examinations. Good afternoon, and thank you for your attendance, and I now turn this meeting over to our very capable moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, P.S. Armbristow. And now I'd like to invite Director of Education, Mr. Marcellus Taylor, to bring remarks. Mr. Taylor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Albury. Although I'm going to be bringing remarks, these are going to be long remarks, much longer than normal. So I want you to hold on and have some patience with me. But, you know, it's good to be here to talk about the BJC and the BGCSE exams. As you know, over the last few years, we have had a lot of difficulties. But one thing is sure, is that we were, as a group in the ministry, especially our colleagues at examination and assessment, resolved to ensure that students got the opportunity to sit the exam so that we were not the encumbrance to them, at least being able to demonstrate and gain that credential. Minister of Education, Honorable Glennis Hannah Martin, Minister of State, Honorable Zane Lightburn, Permanent Secretary, Undersecretary Culmer, my senior colleagues, Deputy Directors, Deputy Permanent Secretaries, Assistant Director Sawyer, Consultant Clerk, and colleagues from the Examination and Assessment Division, and others who are in the room, members of the press, and those who are joining via TV or virtual format. A pleasant good afternoon. It was some 30 years ago, after the first sitting of the BGCSE, that a press conference was held to provide members of the media, and indeed the general public, with a report on the performance of candidates who sat in those exams in 1993. Since 1994, after the reintroduction of the BJC, the performance of candidates who sat both the BJC and the BGCSE exams were reported. As education stakeholders, we are fully aware that public examination results have a direct effect upon the education system of a country. The national exams attempt to ensure that the assessment procedures reflect relevancy to the Bahamian situation and at the same time maintain credible standards. These standards are no less exacting than those of overseas examinations, which have been respected and relied upon for more than 80 years. Despite the many setbacks which since March of 2020 have resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic, we wish to publicly commend Assistant Director of Education Sawyer and her staff of the Examination and Assessment Division for ensuring that the development and administration of our national exams were not adversely impacted. They are here. Ms. Sawyer is at the head table, and her colleagues are in the audience, and I wish all of us to give them a round of applause. And please stand, please stand. Thank you very much. Our sincere gratitude is extended to educators throughout our Commonwealth who have had to adjust to using new modalities to provide instruction and to prepare our students to sit these national exams. It is often said that education is everybody's business. The role of parents and guardians in this process cannot be overemphasized and is also deeply appreciated. We wish to once again emphasize that the national exams are reported on a 7-point scale, grades A to G. And in doing so, our focus is on recognizing positive achievement. The year 2022 marks the 29th sitting of the BJC since its reintroduction in 1994. This year, 9,571 candidates from 113 centers were registered to sit the exams. 51 were government schools, while 62 centers were independent or private. The total number of subjects tested was 13. The total candidature represents an increase of 0.25% when compared to 2021, when 9,549 candidates from a total of 112 centers participated. The total number of grades awarded was 35,340 when compared to 2021, where 34,622 students participated. That's a 2% increase. Again, this year, mathematics and English language were the two most heavily subscribed subjects. This year, 8 subjects, namely mathematics, general science, health science, family and consumer science, Spanish, French, literature, and technical drawing, showed an improvement when compared to the 2021 performance. Positively, when compared with last year, there was a significant percentage increase in the total number of grades awarded at A to D, and a decrease in the grades awarded E through U. Statistically, this combination is the best indication of an improved performance. When compared with last year, improved overall performance is noted in some public and private schools on the islands of Abaco, Acklins, Andros, Cat Island, Eleuthera, Exuma, Grand Bahama, Inagua, and San Salvador. Let us now look at some specific comparisons. 1. The number of candidates receiving a minimum of 5 or more BJCs with grades C or above. In this year, a total of 1,361 candidates receive a grade of C or higher in 5 or more subjects. This represents 14.2% of the overall candidates and a 16, almost 17% increase when compared with last year. There were 1,164 candidates in 2021 who received a grade of C or higher in 5 or more BJC subjects. 2. The number of candidates receiving a minimum of 5 subjects or more with grade D or above. So just a small modification to include the grade D. This year, a total of 1,849 candidates receive a minimum grade of D in at least 5 subjects. This represents 19% of the overall candidature and a 13% increase when compared to last year. Last year, there were 1,630 candidates who achieved this mark. 3. The number of candidates who received the combination of at least of a grade C in mathematics, language arts, and a science. Please note, this combination of grades has no indication on the overall composition of candidates, nor can any generalized statements be made about the candidates. Every year, candidates sit the BJC exam over multiple sittings. Because of this, a large number of candidates may not sit mathematics, English language, and a science in the same year. This does not necessarily mean that they don't possess this combination of subjects, but they may just not get it all in that same year. In this year, a total of 1,349 candidates achieved at least an A to C in mathematics, English language, and a science subject. This represents 14% of all of the candidates and an almost 30% increase when compared to last year. There were 1,045 such candidates last year. Let us now turn our attention to the BGCSE examinations. The year 2022, this year, marks the 30th sitting of the BGCSE examination since its first administration in 1993. 4,906 candidates from 96 centers were registered to sit these examinations. 39 were at government schools, while 57 were at independent or private centers. The number of candidates represents a decrease of about 5% when compared to last year, when the total was 5,147 candidates who were spread across 97 centers. The total number of subject offerings in both years was 27. As a result of the decrease in candidature, the number of awarded grades decreased when compared to last year. There were 17,546 grades awarded this year. This is a slight decrease of about 2%, because last year's total was 17,909 grades awarded. English language, biology, mathematics, religious studies continue to remain the subjects of choice for the vast majority of candidates. Art and design scheme C, auto mechanics, and clothing construction remain the least subscribed subjects. Of the 27 subjects tested, improved performance was noted in 11 subjects when compared to last year's performance. They are Art and Design B, Chemistry, Combined Science, English Language, Food and Nutrition, French, Geography, History, Literature, Keyboarding Skills, and Religious Studies. The BGCSE exam is designed to cater to at least 80% of students in grade 12. It is anticipated that at least 80% of the candidates sitting the exam would receive a grade or achieve a grade A to G. It is interesting to note that again this year, more than 80%, or 83.5% to be exact, of the grades awarded continue to range from A to E, which is now becoming the recurring accomplishment. This percentage is a slight increase and is comparable to previous years. There are significant increases at A to C, and in fact, the 10.38% of grades A, which were awarded this year, is the highest that has been awarded since 2018. More importantly, it is also noteworthy to highlight that 52.6% of grades received by candidates this year are in the range of A to C. Similar to last year, females continue to outperform males, receiving high percentages of A to C and low percentages of D to U. Contrary to the females' performances, the performance of males decreased at the grade A and B levels, while the percentage for females increased. On the other hand, and positive for males, the percentage at G decreased when compared to last year. The percentage for females increased. Negatively, the percentages at U increased for males and females. This increase has had a negative impact on the overall performance of the BGCSE. When compared to last year, improved performances were noted in some public and private schools on the following islands: Abaco, Andros, Bimini, Crooked Island, Eleuthera, Exuma, Grand Bahama, Inagua, Mayaguana, and New Providence. As with the BJC, I wish to draw to your attention some specific comparisons. 1. The number of candidates receiving a minimum grade C in at least 5 subjects. In 2022, a total of 633 candidates receive a grade C or higher in 5 or more subjects. This represents about 13% of the overall candidature and about 15% increase when compared with last year. There were 550 such candidates last year. 2, the number of candidates receiving a minimum of 5 subjects or more with a grade D or above. This year, a total of 952 such candidates obtained the minimum grade of D in at least 5 subjects. This represents about 20% of the overall candidature and almost a 9% increase when compared with last year. There were 875 such candidates last year. 3, the number of candidates who have received the combination of at least a C grade in mathematics, English language, and a science. Please note, this combination of grades has no indication on the overall composition of candidates, nor can any generalized statement be made about the candidates. Every year, candidates sit the BGCSE, over multiple sittings, as we indicated with BJC. And so because of this, a large number of candidates may not sit mathematics, English, and science in the same year. But it doesn't necessarily mean that students don't have this combination over the number of years of sitting. This year, a total of 392 candidates received at least a grade C or better in mathematics, English language, and a science subject. This represents 8% of the overall candidature and 2.6% increase when compared with last year, where 382 candidates fell into that category. While we recognize the pockets of improved performance in both the BJC and the BGCSE exams when compared to 2020 and 2021, we are also aware that greater efforts must be made by all stakeholders in order to recover the learning loss which has occurred since March of 2020. Our target of improving the graduation rate from 50% to 85% is still possible with renewed focus to our mandate of providing a quality education for all. The Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training recommits to ensuring that we will do all that is within our power to ensure that all children in this great Commonwealth of the Bahamas are afforded the opportunity to receive an education which will allow them to become self-actualized, productive citizens who will contribute to the growth and development of this country and, by extension, the world. So on behalf of the Department of Education, I wish to thank you very much for your attention to my extended remarks, and will advise that our technical experts who are here from examination and assessment can indeed at appropriate times provide more clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Taylor. Out of all the numbers that you gave, I was writing notes on what you said. For me, what stood out was a greater effort is needed by all for us to begin to recover from what we lost during the pandemic. A greater effort needed by all. And now we'd like to invite our State Minister, the Honorable Zane Lightburn, who will bring remarks and also introduce our Minister of Education and Technical and Vocational Training, the Honorable Glennis Anna Martin, who will give us an overview. Minister Zane Lightburn.
Thank you, Mr. Aubrey. Master of Ceremonies, I stand on the established protocol. I adopt it, also recognizing the Minister of Education and Technical and Vocational Training, along with the Permanent Secretary, Ms. Lorraine Bristol, the Undersecretary, Ms. Sonia Culmer, and our Director, Marcellus Taylor, and Dr. Marcellus Taylor, the Deputy Directors, and our consultant also present in the room, all other special guests and the media. I should know how to work one of these from experience. Okay, got it. I am indeed honored to be here at this time because the director's announcement is one of little baby steps that we're taking in the right direction, however. And it is important for us to measure everything that we do in education because there's a saying that what gets measured gets done. And we know that is definitely our focus to measure where we are at and where we are going. And we are looking for our students to do well because they are the future. The Minister of Education brings a nationalist perspective, and from her experience as a minister, she definitely has a track record of excellence, and therefore that is welcomed along with the spirit that she brings to the Ministry of Education. Our love for our youth and the future of this country is the reason why we're in this business, because we realize that it's our collective survival that depends on it, and also our progress. The end product should be that students leave our walls, our campuses, with the skills and an acceptable level of intelligence to be able to navigate their way through the world, and also to be productive citizens and positive contributors to our country. So we need the right formula, not only in this space at management level, but we need the right formulas on campus. And therefore, we have begun to move also further in that direction to create conducive environments for learning, which includes some of the work that you see going on in an extensive way to improve the environment that our students and our teachers have to exist in for, I would say, the better part of their lives. We need the right formula, and therefore the support and negotiation open door policies that we have brought for all stakeholders, the constant meetings and dialogue that has happened at this level is certainly welcomed in the Ministry of Education. We'll continue to work towards that ultimate goal of getting everyone on the same page. And so we are sought to provide more support to our teachers and administrators by quickly getting to the table to negotiate, to hear their cries, to hear their concerns, to hear at the ground level, and to also partner with them and them partner with us to get buy-in to make sure that our students ultimately achieve at their highest possible levels. And so we are looking to expand not only the subjects offered, but the courses of interest for students that are acceptable at this day and time, that speak to the change and the expectations and are globally competitive for the workforce. And therefore, I am honored to be a part of this process, and the numbers speak for themselves. I recognize the presence of all of the examination and assessment officers in the room, and I commend them for their continued hard work and dedication to the success in educating our youth and the future of this country. I would now like to bring, let's deserve a round of applause. I would now like to bring on our leader, the Minister of Education, the Honorable Glennis Martin. Please give a round of applause as she comes.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I have very brief remarks, but I wanted to begin by saying thank you to the Examinations Division of this Ministry of Education and in our nation, led by Assistant Director of Education Sawyer and fueled by her team who are here in full force this afternoon and who are engaged in such intricate work. I did a tour of that area and I was just amazed at the intricacy of the work that goes into this process. And I want to thank them for perfectly rolling it out and ensuring that this was a smooth, professional process for our students. Let me get my glasses. So, the last few years of examinations, let me just say, I want to thank our teachers also, who are on the front line of instruction. And as you would have heard from the Minister of State, their engagement is critical, and we have to always factor that in. Certainly the last few years of examinations in this country have occurred during a very challenging time in education, brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. The virtual instruction has worked well for some students, maybe even many students, but not so well for others. This has been a difficult time. But despite all of this, you would have heard the director delineate that we have seen improvements in subject areas as he has outlined in both the BJC and BGCSE. So we celebrate those improvements. But there is no doubt that there is much more work to be done in education, in policy and in practice at every level. And this is a work in progress, but I wish the nation to know we intend to be dogged, focused, and strategic in this effort. We are in the process of fortifying the Research, Policy, and Planning Division. We recently engaged an analyst, so we can fully analyze the results of national exams and internal exams at the school throughout the entire spectrum at primary and high school, so that we can be sure that the proper deductions are being drawn from the results, and most importantly, that appropriate and timely interventions are made in response to those findings, so that where we find problematic issues, and we have to be honest about that they're not perpetuated throughout the system and carried by the student all along the way. Sometimes they describe this as social promotion. I believe that extraordinary effort, we already know extraordinary effort is expended, but I mean extraordinary effort must be expended after an appropriate analysis is made of these results, particularly the ones that are done annually at various levels, including the national exams, but not just the national exams, to seek to rescue students who may be struggling with fundamental issues so that they are able to smoothly transition. Much of the success in education, I am told, begins at a focus at the pre-primary level, what we know as preschool level, where the fundamentals are introduced at a light level, and the foundation is laid for learning. It's where children learn to socialize, how to interact, etc. In this country, we have committed to have universal preschool access by which year, Director? 2030. 2030. Understanding it's so important, we have committed to that. And it is a very complex effort. It requires complex effort. And that effort, though, I say, must now be accelerated with great urgency to ensure our children access early education. And as I've indicated, the research shows how important it is to children at that age level. This is easier said than done, but there are many methodologies underway, but we need to find ways to expand. The ministry is also intensifying and deepening the technical and vocational component of the curriculum to allow for corresponding pathways for our students who are motivated and gifted in these areas to pursue their passions and excel. We are now reviewing proposals for the reintroduction of the Learning Channel, and this is tied into the preschool issue, which will allow our children to gain easily accessible reinforcement of literacy and numeracy in and after school hours. I just want to end by saying that it is very important that parents partner with us in these matters. It's easy to say, well, that's what the ministry doing, that's what's happening. But it's not as simple as that. There are many stakeholders in this spectrum of education, and the parents are primary stakeholders. And we need them to partner with us. Simple things like ensuring your children get to school on time, and which is part of their discipline. And discipline is critical. And this will aid them in success in life. Punctuality is a serious skill, getting there on time. So I ask parents to partner with this ministry and their relevant school so that they can have any of their concerns addressed that they may have relative to their child's progress. And I want to assure the Bahamian people and parents of children throughout this nation, in every island and key and rock in this country, we all have the same objective. Just as you, we want your children to emerge as healthy, well-rounded, and confident people so that they may carve out a successful lives for themselves. And so I end by saying, while we see some light, we want the full blaze of the sun on the progress of our children. And I pray to God that that work is underway. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Hannah Martin. And now we'd invite members of the press to ask questions. I ask that you limit your questions to 2 to each media house. We now invite questions. Go ahead. Make sure you have the microphone, sir.
I do have a two-part question, 2 questions. So the first question is in regards to clarity when it comes to the numbers. Obviously, I think it's relative, according to Dr. Marcellus Taylor, those numbers, students sitting this year compared to last year. We're aware that last year there were a number of students that did not sit national exams. So just wanted to get some clarity on the number of candidates when it comes to GLAT, BJC, BGCSE that aren't necessarily in those years, students of 6th, 9th, or 12th graders. We obviously know that there are many candidates that aren't for that year, but do become a part of those numbers. And just wanted to get some clarity in regards to that. And the second question I do have, Minister Martin, Hannah Martin, you spoke earlier in regards to the deductions and appropriate assessment going forward. But again, and then lastly, you mentioned the inclusion of parents. We obviously have tools like Schoology, Edmodo, or even the current LMS system. Can those systems be enhanced or integrated to allow, with the assistance, of course, with parents, but to properly monitor and target laggers when it comes to academics or even those who are tardy?
Minister? Okay. Ms. Sinclair, are you available to answer that? The LMS? Can you come here? Come this way, please. Yes.
So I will talk about numbers.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. In regards to the monitoring of the performance of students within the learning management system that the Ministry of Education is currently implemented, that is already a possibility. Parents have been asked to do 2 things. One, give their email addresses to the schools that their children attend. They are able to access the system using their email address. That's the first. Second is that they can also log into their child's account on the learning management system. They are able to see the progress of their children as it pertains to not just their performance, but also attendance in the system, as well as the content that has been uploaded for students, the assignment. So they're able to follow even now what happens with that.
Just before you walk me, just clarity in terms of those that in fact are lagging, Again, properly targeting those students in terms of a triangular approach involving the
Yes.
school, teachers,
Yes.
parents, and students to get them back on track.
Yeah, so parents have been asked to ensure that they keep in contact with students' teachers. They've also, last year, we noticed that they've also been attending PTA meetings more. And that may be because we've had virtual PTA meetings for the most part. Parents are able to log in even if they're at home, wherever they are, and follow and speak with the teacher. They are also able to use the social media platforms that are implemented by the teachers of the schools. So there is that contact. They're on Facebook. So every school has a Facebook page. They have social media in terms of WhatsApp. Those tools are also being used along with the LMS. And the key thing, though, is the communication channels need to remain open between all of the stakeholders.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Director will answer that part.
Yes, I think if I understand the question, you're really getting at students out of the standard cohort participating in the exams. Well, I think, you know, at the very beginning of the introduction of BGCSE, the idea was that only grade 12 students would write the exam. But that the policy really fell away because of practice. Because, you know, in independent schools and even in government schools, the intent is not to hold students back just to wait on an exam. And so we don't break out the statistic because it'll be a little bit convoluted for us to do that and reporting on who was in grade 11 and did the exam and who was in grade 12. So we just give one general statistic, but it's like a give and take. Because if you did it in grade 11, you won't necessarily do it in grade 12. And if you do it in grade 12, then you may not do it in grade 11. So we just look at it as a group of students who sat the exam in 2021. It's not an identical number to the number of students in grade 12, but it's a general proxy. And that's why when we were talking about the students who received a C grade in math, English, and science, we made the point that the students may not get it in that one single sitting, but they may get it over different years because we understand that is a practice, and we've become more flexible over time with allowing students to take the exam out of their grade level, you know, the standard grade level, in order to meet the student where the student is, as opposed to the student having to wait to sit an exam or have to take it in grade 9 when they might need to take it in grade 10. So that's the approach.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sinclair. Mr. Taylor. Next question, please. Yes, please use the microphone. This Jasper Ward.
Jasper Ward, Nassau Guardian. So I see for the BGCSE, nearly 4.7, there was a nearly 4.7% decrease in the number of candidates this year, and I think a 15% increase in the number of students who got at least a C in 5 or more subjects. Would you say that the decrease in students this year likely led to the increase or the improvement in those subjects?
Director Taylor.
I don't know that you could make that be in a position to make that assumption. What I could say about those statistics is this, especially the one about the number of candidates. We have seen in this country a diminishing of the school enrollment numbers, and it's not just because of COVID. And I tell my colleagues I'm anxiously awaiting the 2022 census report, because I think this is just an issue of people having fewer children, and we have fewer children in the society. And as cohorts move along, you will see diminishing of participation because of that. The fact that we have a diminished enrollment but have higher, stronger results says that those students who are taking it are performing at better levels. And so, as the minister indicated, clearly we have a ways to go. But once you're moving in that positive direction, this is what you want to see. And so that's how I would look at those results. But I wouldn't necessarily try to make correlations and relationships between them.
So we know Abaco and Grand Bahama were hit by Hurricane Dorian 3 years ago. I know one of the things the minister has brought up is the impact of virtual learning on a lot of students over the years. Can you maybe provide some insight as to how the national examination results look for those two islands this year?
Well, I think we indicated, I can't quite remember, but I think we indicated, I do recall recalling Abaco as one of the islands, that had some improvements, as well as Grand Bahama. Yes, and if you recall, I think in the 2020 iteration, the results in Grand Bahama were quite strong. Abaco, I think, has a little bit more of a challenge, but I think we have to commend the district superintendents and the school administrators and the teachers in those areas who were resolved not to fall behind the rest of the country and who pressed forward. And that's why, I understand we've been through a tough time, and I understand that, we do have some people who have lost out. But my general thinking on it is that people will find a way. People will find a way. That's why we have to continue to make the opportunities. You see, we don't want to fall into creating an excuse for, put the exam off this year because this one ain't ready and that one ain't ready. We run in the program, who ready catch up, who needs some support, we'll try to get them the support, and who can't make it this rush, okay, fine, you come when you're ready. But we can't stop the show because people could come up to the standard if we give them the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Director. And even as a newsman, in terms of the numbers, earlier, many schools had populations of more than 1,000 students. Not many schools today have a population of 1,000. I was just speaking with the principal of the C.R. Walker School, and she said her numbers this year for next week is around 700. That's way down from what it used to be. Next question, please. Are there any more questions? Okay.
All right, just one more question. I
Go ahead.
apologize. So this question, again, is for the minister. I spoke with a teacher from S.C. McPherson recently in regards to the enhancement of curriculum, which involves now the inclusion of entrepreneurial studies, which allow students to excel. Could you clarify if this is intended for that 20%? I think Director Taylor talked about a 20% of 12th graders that may not be sitting that exam. So is that intended for those students to sort of equip them with some tools as they disembark from the education system?
I'm going to ask Didi Poit to come up for a moment, but I'll just say a word or two. Didi Poit will come. But the point I was making, technical and vocational education, curriculum, reform, these are ways to stimulate learning, but also to create corresponding paths for progress for young people. Not everyone is going to be a physicist. I know that I wasn't in that category. So people are different. And so the curriculum, this summer, we had teachers learning coding. It was a sight to see. I went where they were learning, and they're going to be teaching coding to primary school students. But I'm going to ask the Deputy Director Poitier to give some advice on, or share with you what we've been doing. Or are doing.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for your question. We talk about reform in curriculum, and as Minister indicated, there are reforms related to technical and vocational education. Coding is one of them. Entrepreneurship is another. You spoke about a 20% of persons who perhaps may not have engaged in the examinations. Well, I'm sure you've heard about the program that we have with BTVI, allowing those students to matriculate there. And so there is reform underway for those students who may not be as academically inclined. And so, yes, we are moving in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Poitier.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes, ma'am.
The other thing, Didi Poet did not mention, but what she's leading the work in, is that we're trying to engage students to be more inquisitive. So it's less fact memorization and more inquiry, critical thinking, so that, that stimulus takes place in school. So that is work in progress as we speak, the modality of learning, how young people learn. We have to keep working at it till we get to the core of how our young people learn. What are the barriers? We have to bust them off and allow our brilliant young children to excel. That is why the Research, Planning, and Policy Division is so critical, because it will help us analyze what are the barriers, what are the challenges, where are the issues with our young people, and how do we create modalities to allow them to reach the pinnacle of learning. And that is the work that we now have underway.
Thank you very much, Minister. So, if that concludes all the questions, I want members of the media to know that at the conclusion of this press conference, a press release with the examination statistics will be available on the BIS chat. It's some 23 pages long, so that'll be available on the BIS chat. So that concludes questions from the press. We'd like to thank members of the press for coming. That brings this live press conference to a close, dealt with the 2022 National Examinations results. This has been a production of the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training. I am Vaughn Aubrey. Remember, it takes all of us to make this thing called education work. And perhaps most importantly, we need parents to get involved, to communicate, and to collaborate. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.